For this week and the next couple of weeks until week 6, you'll focus on developing your design for each presentation. It is in this stage that you, the designer, will draw on the design elements and design principles to effectively do this. The way to do this will vary from design to design and student to student. So suggestions are provided in this presentation, but for more specific suggestions related to your SAT and the unique set of conditions that you've got for your design problems, you'll need to contact your teacher. Some ideas for you include looking at different colour schemes, appropriate type choice, different line qualities you could use, different forms and shapes from organic to geometric. The design principles you might want to think about include things like development of a pattern, exploration of figure-ground relationships by reversing colour schemes, the use of cropping to focus attention on a particular design element. Using the design elements and design principles effectively is assessed by criteria 5, which is worth 10 marks, and we'll get into this after this slideshow. Being able to effectively use the design elements and design principles is just one part of the story. You must also annotate how and why you've used them, and this relates back to the design brief and the purpose of the finished piece, the message you want to convey, or the ideas and information that are required to be communicated. Now, you learnt about how to apply and analyse the design elements and design principles in Unit 3 on your own work and in a range of other visual examples. So do you remember back in week 4 of Unit 3 and all those visuals you analysed? To review the design elements and design principles in detail again, you can read through the Guthrie textbook, Chapter 3, which is really comprehensive. The image here on this slide is from the Top Designs Catalogue 2013, and it reveals a concept development folio page which shows the exploration of the design elements and design principles by Georgia Aldous. What I want to do now is show you over the next several slides different visual examples out there in the world, and I'll focus on a specific design element or design principle evident in them. Of course, there are going to be many more elements and principles evident, but I just want to focus on one particular one. So the first one we'll look at is this Big Day Out poster. Now, I want to focus on, taking me a while to get used to this, I want to focus on line. So what I want to point your attention to is the white outline, and we refer to this as a stroke. And what it does is it emphasises the central type. So if you can imagine, without the white outline, the predominantly blue patterned text would be quite lost in the very busy background. The thickness of the stroke helps the central type to pop from the background. You can also see evidence of line in the red lines in the background behind the word day, which appear to radiate above the type. And symbolically, this might be considered to represent fireworks or explosions. So the next example is some packaging, and what I want to focus on here is the shape. So the organic shapes on the Freuve package evoke the farm fresh flavours of the fruit and vegetable drink content. The illustrated shapes, possibly created in a vector-based program like Illustrator, represent different aspects of fruit farming. You can see the young kids carrying fruit, pulling carrots from the ground. There's a tractor in there. There is also geometric shape in the yellow bands which radiate behind the central text Freuve. And this shape and the hue, which is yellow, suggests the warmth and growth-giving properties of the sun. Moving on to some more shape now, we look at this graphic, this logo or visual identity for the Sydney Superdome. And you can see, and this is actually designed by Ken Cato and Partners, so they're a very big graphic design firm. And you can see here that the very geometric, sharp, triangular shapes here symbolise a generator or a conductor or a transmitter of energy. And they radiate outwards from the typography. So this might be considered to represent an explosion of energy, making the Sydney Superdome seem like a very exciting place. Now we'll move on to this particular example, and form is really evident in this one. So this image was located on a City Council website, and you can see that it uses 3D architectural modelling software to effectively bring to life and communicate the form of the 2D plans that that particular colour form sits on. Now the form is very geometric in design, which is very typical of architectural forms. Here we see a great example of type and scale, type style, the bold and regular, and kerning, which is the space between individual letters, are really exploited in this David Carson collage. And one could look at that and think that it suggests the ephemeral nature of the bill posters that we see around our environment, on building walls, you know, on Stobie poles, on columns in your local area. Let's look at this example again of a logo, an identity. This I thought was a really good example of point. Now the points used in this identity evoke the map connection points, which might suggest how the organisations link various regions within Victoria, so it really emphasises the name, and the linking happens through their arts program. I thought this was a good example of colour. So a deep green hue is the choice for Woolworths colour branding. Perhaps this was chosen because it symbolises freshness and sustainability, things natural. And interestingly, it's the opposite or contrasting colour used by their food retail rival, Coles. I thought this next example was a really good example of texture. So the bumpy pattern in the overlapped layers here help convey the texture of vintage newsprint. In this one we see the tones of the image which emphasise the form of the ionic column, and this can help symbolise the company as stable, traditional and established. Now we're going to move on to design principles. The first one we're going to look at is cropping. Now the cropping of the mid-forearm forces our attention to the clenched fist and the power and the drama. And then obviously the position of the text revolution helps to reinforce the message. Let's look here at some bill posters that I found on a wall near where I live. This is Figure Ground. And you can see the white space in the background is clearly the ground element in this poster, and the geometric shapes of different gradient hues occupy the figure or the foreground elements. This is a really good example of balance. And here you can see it's an asymmetrical balanced visual. The visual weight of the surfer on the left-hand side is balanced out by the large multicoloured typographic forms on the right-hand side. Now this dynamic layout is possibly quite suitable for the energetic surf brand. We're going to look at balance again, but this time symmetrical balance. And you can see that it's very evident in this poster, and it enhances the conservative and formal aspects of the visual. The only difference being the angled sort of rectangular block that's on a bit of a slant in the middle. So that kind of creates a bit of emphasis on that central element because everything else around it is very symmetrically balanced. Let's look now at another design principle which is really useful in your work, and that is contrast. Now we can see there's contrast in typographic style here. So different typefaces are used for this photographer's identity. The contrast of the handwritten type against the mostly formal sans serif type in black helps to differentiate between identity, which is the photographer, and the service, which is the portraits. Let's now look at another important one of hierarchy. Now magazines, newspapers and websites tend to follow hierarchical conventions. Hierarchy is about importance and having an obvious order of importance to help the viewer move their eye through a visual. In this case, type size is varied in scale. The largest scale type tends to be reserved for the name of the publication or site and tends to sit at the top section or the masthead of the page screen. Images are scaled at various sizes, but there tends to be one dominant image that pulls the attention of the audience and sets the tone or the context of the articles that the issue cover. Here we see a design principle of pattern. Now this poster is aimed at educating Monash University staff to reduce their electricity consumption by turning their office lights off when they go to lunch or have a meeting. So this is the communication purpose. Now the way that this has been emphasised by using pattern is it utilises an alternating pattern in the background, which can kind of emphasise the rhythmic, repetitive action of turning lights on and off, on and off, on and off. So you can see that the little light globes in the background say you. There's a yellow light bulb meaning on, and then the white light bulb meaning off. So it's sort of a flickering pattern, which I think really helps to communicate that message. Let's now look quickly at scale. I'm running out of time here. Now scale here is pretty evident in the number 10, and this is produced at an extreme scale to denote the 10th occurrence of the film festival. And finally, we'll look at proportion. Now the rule of thirds is a mathematical proportion which has been applied in this poster. Now the eyes are drawn toward the face of the actor, and it reveals an understanding by the designer of the study of beauty and balance in layout. So our eyes are naturally drawn to the intersection points, and the intersection points of the vertical and horizontal lines here are the rule of thirds. So the idea is if you place something really important at one of these intersection points, it's actually a natural way for us to be drawn to something. So it actually is what we'd be drawn to anyway. So if you want to put something within those intersecting points, that's the way to do it. And for more information on proportion, because I know that a lot of students find this a tricky principle, you can actually look up the rule of thirds or the Fibonacci sequence for more information there. And the final slide that I wanted to talk you through is what to do now. So this week, that's week 4, we'd like you to produce an additional 2 to 3 A3 development pages for each presentation, focusing specifically on the way that design elements of colour, type, line, point, shape, form, tone and texture can be exploited to develop your concept. While you are not required to use all the design elements, you should explore as thoroughly as you can the ones that are most appropriate to your design topic. Now, most of you are going to be using colour, particularly type if we're looking at a graphic design. If you're doing a three-dimensional design, you're probably going to be exploring a lot of form and tone and texture and shape. You need to include annotations that identify the element used and a reflection on the decisions that you made in using these elements in the way that you have. Make sure you indicate how using these elements have assisted in communicating the key message or idea that you're looking for in communicating to your audience. Now, the other thing you need to do in those 2 to 3 development pages is focus on the ways in which design principles of cropping, hierarchy, balance, figure ground, proportion, scale, contrast and pattern can be exploited to develop your concept. So again, while you're not required to use all of the design principles, you really need to explore as thoroughly as you can the ones that are most appropriate to your design topic. So you also, again, for the design principles, you've got to include annotations that actually identify the principle, and that means naming the principle, and a reflection on how the decisions that you made in using these principles in the way that you have. Make sure you indicate how using these principles have assisted in communicating the message and ideas for your audience. So now that you've had a little look at this particular presentation, we're going to look a bit more closely at how design elements and design principles are actually going to be assessed, and I'll take you through another presentation with lots of examples of student work to kind of inspire you.